Hello, welcome to Train Signal. This is the client monitoring lesson in the System Center Operations Manager 2012 training course. So why would you ever consider monitoring a client with your server-centric monitoring tool? Well, don't forget, some clients run critical workloads. And if those workloads are ignored, the organization can proceed at its peril. For example, many point-of-sale machines run desktop editions of Windows and things like that. Therefore, being able to monitor clients can be just as critical as monitoring servers in some operations manager environments. In other words, some clients are critical infrastructure. You know, a lot of people talk about operations manager as being a server-centric solution. I prefer to think of it as a service-centric solution. And when you think about that, the goal of the product is to monitor the services and ensure that all services remain healthy and available, whether they're running on servers or they're running on desktops. In this lesson, we're going to look at some ways you can monitor clients in Operations Manager 2012. Specifically, we're going to look at something called agentless exception monitoring. So, what is agentless exception monitoring? Well, think about this. In your organization, once in a while an application will crash, right? And you'll get a message saying, do you want to send certain pieces of information to Microsoft? And often you'll say yes, sometimes you'll say no. But every time Microsoft gets a piece of that information, it knows that something has gone wrong. Well, here's what agentless exception monitoring can do for you. With the crash and hang monitoring capability, you can enhance your existing Windows error reporting, what's also called Watson, because if you go back way back in the old days of Windows, to send crash events to both local event logs as well as to management servers, and then eventually onto Microsoft. So basically, you can capture these crash events and begin correlating them a little bit to understand in your environment where things might be going badly. Now, the term agentless here is important. It means that there's no agent to install. So in order for this to work, there's got to be some other mechanism by which the clients are configured to get these pieces of information to the Operations Manager console. Now, the beauty of this whole thing is there's not that much overhead, and it's all done with existing Windows tools. And agentless exception monitoring also includes a number of pre-built reports. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to enable Operations Manager for client monitoring. And then we're going to enable the clients for client monitoring. I mentioned before that we had to do something to make them realize that they were supposed to send their reports on to Operations Manager rather than just to Microsoft. And we're going to use group policies to make that happen. And then we'll do a little bit more with customization of the client monitoring feature. But I want to go back to the other page, and we're going to start with what you see on the screen. So without further ado, let's go over to the Operations Manager environment and get started configuring agentless exception monitoring. And here we are, back over at the Operations Manager console. As you can see, I've gone to the administration area. One of the items here is configure client monitoring. That is the item we're looking for. So I'll click it. And this is that client monitoring configuration wizard that I talked about a little while ago. So click next to proceed beyond this introduction page. Choose your management server. I have just one. This will become the server that's going to be used to collect and forward data. Basically, this will forward information to Microsoft from your clients. And this is where we talk about the Customer Experience Improvement Program. Remember, this is the program that helps Microsoft basically make products better. You can opt in or you can opt out. And the question is, do you want to centrally collect all of this information and then forward it to Microsoft? Or do you want to have it sent directly to Microsoft from the client machines? Our goals were to centralize the collection of this machine before sending it to Microsoft. So we're going to choose, yes, use the selected management server to collect and forward CEIP data to Microsoft, but we're not going to use SSL. We're just going to allow it to be in plain text. Again, I don't have all the SSL certificates assigned, so we will not be using SSL for this demonstration. and click Next. Now we have to have a place to capture the reports that we want to have sent off to Microsoft. So we have to have a file share. I'm just going to use C:\error data, which is the default. Again, we're not going to use SSL. And we'll collect reports from Windows Vista based or later clients. And here's the port it'll use. The organization name to use. It doesn't really matter. We're going to leave the default there for Microsoft if we want to, or we could change this to GlobalMantics. Next. Next is, do we want to forward all collected errors to Microsoft? Yeah, we'll send everything to Microsoft, basic and detailed. When you choose detailed, basic is also included. This is going to include the error signature and requested additional data. Now that could mean some personal data gets sent to Microsoft. Before you enable this sort of a feature, make sure that it abides by your organization's security and information policies. Next. We'll use the existing user account to perform this action. Next. The file share was created successfully. This is a green check mark. Is a good thing always in Operations Manager. And next again. Here's where we have a group policy administrative template being created. We're going to apply this in our organization where we have all client machines stored. This is going to contain the settings that are necessary for client machines to forward their error information on to Operations Manager so that it is then sent from Operations Manager rather than directly from the machine. Click the Browse button if you want to save that elsewhere. I'm just going to leave it there. And finish. So that did the first part of agentless exception monitoring or client monitoring in Operations Manager 2012, which was to enable the Operations Manager server for client monitoring. Now we're going to enable the clients for client monitoring by creating a group policy that uses that template we just created. As you can see, I'm on the domain controller for GlobalMantics, and I've already opened the Group Policy Management console. If you don't know how to do that, go to Start, Administrative Tools, Group Policy Management, and you'll get to a place like I am. Notice I've got Group Policy Objects selected, and I've got a default domain policy. This is what I want to modify because I want all machines in my environment to be reporting their errors to Operations Manager rather than directly to Microsoft. So I'm going to right-click Default Domain Policy, and I'm going to choose, first of all, to back it up. So we'll do a Browse, and I'll just back it up to the desktop. Default Domain Policy. I like to back things up before I mess with them. And the process was successful. Now I feel comfortable messing with the default domain policy. So I'll choose Edit. And under Computer Configuration, I'll expand Policies, Administrative Templates. I'm going to right-click Administrative Templates and choose Add Remove Templates. Now, when we get to the Add Remove Templates page, I'm going to point to the template that was created in the previous step when we enabled client monitoring in the Operations Manager console. So I'll click Add, and I know that is on the Operations Manager machine, on the C drive. So go to Users, the administrator.globalmantics, My Documents, and there's the administrative template that was created earlier today. And that's the one we'd like to add. As we expand down through, we'll see that we need to go through to System Center Operations Manager. Now, don't get confused by, I'm going to make this bigger, the System Center 2012 Operations Manager node you already see. That's different. That's actually was installed earlier on. We're looking for classic administrative templates, Microsoft applications, System Center, Operations Manager, and then we have SCOM Client Monitoring CEIP settings. And we've got to go through and enable each one of these settings. And I'm going to choose Standard View because we can see a little bit more. And double-click each one. So we'll enable the Customer Experience Improvement Program, and this is where it's going to send that information. You'll notice that it's already configured. That's because of that we provided all the details for this particular policy when we enabled client monitoring on the Operations Manager server. So most of these pieces of information should be filled in for us, if not all. And then OK. We then have client monitoring. Is there anything here? There's in the master node, there are some items we need to configure as well. Configure error reporting for Windows Vista and later operating systems. Enable. Again, notice we're not using SSL certificates. It knows that we're not using SSL because we told it we weren't. That's a good thing. Configure error notification. Enabled. Do we want to show the user interface to the user? Probably not. Again, that can just confuse people when they see it. Error reporting for systems older than Vista. Well, here we go. Corporate upload file path is that file share we created. Remember back when we created the file share for enabling client monitoring under Operations Manager. Replace the instances of the word Microsoft with Global Mantic. And we just keep all the defaults. Then we go to Advanced Error Reporting Settings. And you can kind of see that I'm simply going through all the various settings and enabling them. So I'm not going to sit here and bore you to death. But we'll report operating system errors. Unplanned shutdown events are always good to report. This shows that there's something potentially going bad in the environment. And then we even have error reporting for office type situations. Now, one of the things to bear in mind is you're going to see that a couple of these still say disabled, even when we try to enable them. That's okay later on. They're still going to be enabled, but they just show as disabled in the console. So if we look at a few of these, we may see a couple that are showing as disabled even when we choose the enabled button. That's okay. We can choose show UI, and that'll actually keep that enabled for us. But either way, it would actually have been enabled. And then client monitoring for Windows Media Player, of all things. Enabled, again, this is probably one that's going to show us as being disabled, even though it's really enabled. So we'll just force it to be enabled, even though it's really enabled behind the scenes. Enabled. And OK. Then we go to File menu and choose Exit. And we just basically added all that information to our default domain policy. And we can validate that by going to Edit, Policies, Administrative Templates, Classic, and System Center. We're going to see all of those items that we just configured. And through the use of that group policy, we've now satisfied the second part of this demonstration. We also configured the Microsoft Client Error Reporting when we actually enabled the entire process in the Operations Manager console. Remember, we told that we wanted to participate in the Customer Experience Improvement Program, and we specifically indicated that we wanted to have Customer Experience Improvement Program error reports sent to Operations Manager before being sent on to Microsoft. Before we finish, I want to show you one other change now in the Operations Manager console. You'll notice that we're now in the monitoring area, and we have this item called Agentless Exception Monitoring. That's basically what we just created, or what we just enabled in Operations Manager. Now, nothing's gone awry in the environment yet, so we're not going to see too much, but you're going to see that basically the crash listener, which is that file share, is actually working. That's a good thing, so we're seeing some health information, but we're not going to see any error events yet. We just enabled client monitoring, and nothing's crashed. So we're still in pretty good shape. But as things start coming in, we'll start to see that get populated here so we can start getting an idea for what might be happening out in the environment. And the beauty of this whole thing is you didn't have to install an Operations Manager agent on all of your desktops in order to enable this feature. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.